Chris. Some of you may remember me from our Remotely Christmas project that we did at Christmas, and some of you may not. And if you're one of the people that not, well, why not? Anyway, we are here today to celebrate World Book Day. As you will see, I'm not Hope and I am not Sunny. They are busy away reading their books and sorting out their costume about what they're going to be wearing today. Hope is going to be reading you some of her favourite stories that she had from a child. The first one being Harry Mcclary's Show Business, which was written and illustrated by Lynley Dodd and is published by Puffin Books. She's also going to be reading the brilliant Snitchell von Krum, Basket Work, again by Lynley Dodd and published by Puffin Books. She's also going to be reading An Acorn for Tea, which was written by Julie Sykes, illustrated by Catherine Walters, and is published by Maggie Books. And she's also going to be reading Panda Surprise, which is a fantastically colourful book written by Eileen Brown and illustrated as well by Eileen and is published by Walker Books. So they are coming up very shortly. Before we get to Hope's story, some of you will know Liz Million, our fantastic author and illustrator. We had a little catch up with her to see what her thoughts were as a child and what made her get into what she does today.
Hi everyone! Now the Brightsiders have asked me to say hello because I am a children's book illustrator and author. Now I have done so many books. I've done so many I could barely pick them up. But what I thought I would chat to you about is how I got my job and also what was I like when I was little. Now I wasn't always great at drawing. I used to draw just like you guys. Have a look at those. Then when I got older to years sort of 5 and 6, I started to be the best person in the whole class for drawing, but I wasn't very good at maths. So what I did is I went to college. I went to university for 3 years in London, and that was 23 years ago. So that is a long time. And my first ever book was Little Red Riding Hood, and that makes me laugh now. It's like you looking back at your year 1 work. You have come a long way since that year 1 work. I've also done Little Fred Riding Hood. I have done traditional stories like Little Pigs and Goldilocks. I have done crazy books with crazy animals in, like these. I've even done a book about a sausage, okay? So I have done lots and lots of different books. Now, which were my favourite books when I was little? These were my favourite books. I had one with a goat. These are Ladybird books, and this troll used to terrify me, and I used to love Avril the apricot and look inside there. So I used to copy these pictures. I used to make up my own stories. I was always reading as a kid, and these books here were very sort of realistic and a little bit scary sometimes. So what sort of books do you like to read? Remember, reading is really important and really good for your imagination, as is drawing. Now I've been drawing this week for World Book Week. I reckon if I sent you some sheets, Brightsiders, you would be able to draw and design some book characters for me.
I'm going to be reading Panda Surprise, written and illustrated by Eileen Brown and published by Walker Books. Handa put 7 delicious fruits in a basket for her friend Akio. She will be surprised, thought Handa, as she set off for Akio's village. I wonder which fruit she'll like best. Will she like the soft yellow banana or the sweet-smelling guava? Will she like the round juicy orange or the ripe red mango? Will she like the spiky-leaved pineapple, the creamy green avocado, or the tangy purple passion fruit? Which fruit will Akio like best? Hello, Akio, said Handa. I've brought you a surprise. Tangerines, said Akio, my favourite fruit. Tangerines, said Handa. That is a surprise. Now this book is called Schnitzel von Crumb's Basket Work, and it's by Linley Dodd. It's also illustrated by Linley Dodd, and it was published by Puffin Books. Tucked in a hidey hole under the stair lay a rickety basket in need of repair. A chewed up old cushion, a blanket all worn, everything broken and smelly and torn. And under the blanket, his paws on his tum, happily snoring, lay Schnitzel von Crumb. He liked all the tatters, he liked every tear, the broken down edges, the holes and the hair. The smell was so friendly, and as for the fit, if he needed a squeeze, did he mind? Not a bit. But, yuck, said his family. Time to say no. This beaten up basket must instantly go. It's scruffy, it's dirty, it's hopelessly small, and we really can't have such a smell in the hall. So they lifted the basket and took it away, and bought him another the very same day. He tried it for size, there was room for his tum, but it didn't smell friendly to Schnitzel von Crumb. The basket was smart, and a much better fit. But was it cosy and comforting? No, not a bit. He made a new bed in a jumble of shirts, pyjamas and towels and flowery skirts, but something was wrong with the smell and the fit. Was it cosy and comforting? No, not a bit. He made a new bed with the dusters and mops, the cleaners and brooms and the preserving jar tops, but something was wrong with the smell and the fit. Was it cosy and comforting? No, not a bit. He made a new bed in a rack full of greens, with the spinach and celery, parsley and beans, but something was wrong with the smell and the fit. Was it cosy and comforting? No, not a bit. He made a new bed at the side of the shed, in the daisies and dahlias, yellow and red, but something was wrong with the smell and the fit. Was it cosy and comforting? No, not a bit. Poor Schnitzel von Crumb, he sat on the stair and dreamed of his basket, the holes and the hair, the broken down edges, the blanket all worn, everything scruffy and smelly and torn. His ears dropped down and his tail did too. Help, said his family, what can we do? So, back to the hidey hole under the stair went the battered old basket in need of repair. And back in a hurry went Schnitzel von Crumb, with a wag of his tail and a heave of his tum. The new one was smart and a much better fit, but when it had gone, did he mind? Not a bit. I'm going to be reading An Acorn for Tea, written by Julie Sykes and illustrated by Catherine Walters, and published by Maggie Books. On the edge of Teaselwood, in a large tree, lived Rufus Squirrel. Like most squirrels, he was always hungry. One day, when Rufus went to his store to get an acorn for tea, he found it empty. Oh dear, I don't remember eating everything, said Rufus, peering into all the corners, just in case something had rolled in the back. Well, I shall just have to go out and gather some more acorns. Rufus scampered down the tree trunk and along the path towards the oak trees, and on the way he met Merry Mouse. Rufus, what a luck seeing you, she cried. Are you going to the woods? I'm so busy with my babies, I haven't had time to find dinner. Can you bring me back a juicy berry? Rufus liked to help his friends, so he cheerfully agreed. 7 babies were no joke. Off he went, saying to himself, a juicy berry and some acorns for tea. Rufus hadn't gone far when he heard another voice. Who's there? Asked Morris Mole, poking his head out of his molehill. It's me, shouted Rufus loudly. Sometimes he forgot that Morris was short-sighted, not deaf. If you're going into the woods, will you bring me back a special crunchy leaf? Asked Morris politely. All right, I will, said Rufus in a quieter voice. The little squirrel scampered on, chanting to himself, a juicy berry, a crunchy leaf, and some acorns for tea. Who's making that noise? Said Barney Badger gruffly. as he climbed out of his set. "Oh, it's you, Rufus. Are you going into the woods?" "Yes, I am," said Rufus. "Can I get you anything?" "Well, since you ask, I'd like a mushroom, and make sure it's a tasty one." "A tasty mushroom," Rufus repeated. "A juicy berry, a crunchy leaf, and some acorns for tea. I mustn't forget anything." Soon, Rufus reached the oak trees. "Lots of acorns," he said happily, gathering up an armful of them. "Plenty for my store, and one for tea." Next, Rufus found a mushroom. "Tasty," he said, nibbling a tiny piece from its cap. He placed the mushroom on top of the acorns, and off they went. A little further on, Rufus found a bright red berry and a crunchy leaf. He balanced them on top of the mushroom. Rufus was in such a hurry that he didn't see the snail until it was too late. Down fell Rufus, the acorns, the tasty mushroom, the crunchy leaf, and the bright red berry. "Bother," said Rufus crossly, picking everything up again. He was really hungry, and he couldn't wait to get home. He staggered along with his goodies. At home, Mary, Morris, and Barney were waiting for him. "Well done, lad," barked Barney when he saw the tasty mushroom. "Thank you, Rufus," said Morris, thrilled with his crunchy leaf. "I shall share this with my babies," squeaked Mary, rushing away with the juicy berry. Suddenly, Rufus remembered his own tea. "Where is it?" he cried, searching around. He couldn't see his acorns anywhere. Poor Rufus! His arms had been so full of food for his friends, he had forgotten to pick up the acorns. "Well, I'll have to go back and get some more," he sighed. As he left for home, for the second time that day, a cheery voice called his name. "Rufus, as you're going out, could you bring me back a seed?" It was Vaux. Rufus paused. "Oh no, not again," he thought. And before Vi could say anything else, he ran off, pretending not to hear her. "Poor Rufus," said Vi to herself. "I do believe he's going deaf." I'm going to be reading Harry Mcclary's Show Business, written and illustrated by Linley Dodd and published by Puffin Books. In Riverside Hall, on Cabbage Tree Row, the Cat Club were having their annual show. There were fat cats and thin cats, tabbies and greys, kick-up-a-din cats with boisterous ways. Cooped up in cages, they practiced their wails, while their owners fussed over their teeth and their tails. Out in the street, tied to a tree, Harry Mcclary was trying to see. He struggled and squirmed, he unravelled the knot, he was dragging his lead, he was off at the trot. He bounced up the steps, he pounced through the door, he pricked up his ears, and he pounced around the floor. Flapping and flustering, bothering and blustering, leaving behind him a hiss and a roar. "Stop!" cried the president. "Collar him quick!" But Harry Mcclary was slippery slick. He slid under tables, he jumped over chairs, he skittered through legs, he sped down the stairs. In and out doorways, through banners and flags, tangling together belongings and bags. Along came Miss Plum with a big silver cup. "Got him," she said, and snaffled him up. Preening and purring, the prize winners sat, with their rosettes and cups on the prize winner's mat. And who won the prize for the scruffiest cat? Harry Mcclary from Donaldson's Dairy.
Thank you, Hope, for those brilliant stories. And well done for getting dressed up. I'm sure I spotted a bit of a vampire look there with a bit of trickle of blood down there, but well done. As I say, hopefully we look forward to receiving your pictures coming in if you've been dressed up as your favourite book character to celebrate World Book Day. But before I go, we have one last story for you. Now, this is a story from a book called 50 Utterly Silly Stories, which is published by Mcclary. And we have Uncle Keith. Uncle Keith Newman will be telling you a story. Now, you may not have met Keith before, but if you think about if you had a zany, wacky uncle, welcome to the world of Keith.
The Lad and the Devil by Sir George Webb Descent. Once upon a time, there was a lad who was walking along a road cracking nuts. He found the one that was worm-eaten, and just at that very moment, up popped the devil. "Is it true now," said the lad, "what they say, that the devil can make himself as small as he chooses and thrust himself in through a pinhole?" "Yes, it is," said the devil. "Oh, it is it? Then let me see you do it, and just see you creep into this nut," said the lad. So the devil did it, and crept inside the nut. Now, when he crept well into the nut, through the worm's hole, the lad stopped it up with a pin. "Now I've got you trapped and safe," he said, and he put the nut in his pocket. When he'd walked on a bit, he came to a smithy. He turned in and asked the blacksmith if he'd be good enough to crack that nut for him. "That's an easy job," said the smith. So he took his smallest hammer, laid the nut on the anvil, and gave it a big bash. But it wouldn't break. So he took another hammer, a little bigger this time, but that wasn't heavy enough either. Then he took one even bigger still, but it was still the same story. So the smith got angry and grasped his great big sledgehammer. "Now I'll crack you to bits," he said, and he let go with the sledgehammer with all his might. And so the nut flew to pieces with a big bang that blew off half the roof of the smithy, and the whole house creaked and groaned as though it was ready to fall. "Why, the very devil himself must have been in that nut," said the smith. "So he was, you're quite right," said the young lad, as he went away laughing.
Well, thanks very much, Keith, for that bright and cheerful story. You really must tell me who your hairdresser is. Need to have a word. Anyway, next up we have Sunny. Now, Sunny's going to be reading a story from an author that I'm sure you all heard of, J.K. Rowling. And he's going to be reading The Wizard and the Hopping Pot.
Hello Brightsiders and happy World Book Day. So today I'm going to read you The Wizard and the Hopping Pot, which is a short story from the Tales of Beedle the Bard, written by J.K. Rowling, also illustrated by J.K. Rowling, and this was published by Bloomsbury. Hope you guys enjoy it. The Wizard and the Hopping Pot. There was once a kindly old wizard who used his magic generously and wisely for the benefit of his neighbours. Rather than reveal the true source of his power, he pretended that his potions, charms and antidotes sprang ready-made from the little cauldron he called his lucky cooking pot. For miles around, people came to him with their troubles, and the wizard was pleased to give his pot a stir and put things right. This well-beloved wizard lived to a goodly age, then died, leaving all his chattels to his only son. This son was of a very different disposition to his gentle father. Those who could not work magic were, to his son's mind, worthless, and he had often quarrelled with his father's habits of dispensing magical aid to their neighbours. Upon his father's death, the son found hidden inside the old cooking pot a small package bearing his name. He opened it, hoping for gold, but found instead a soft, thick slipper, much too small to wear, and with no pair. A fragment of parchment within the slipper bore the words, "In the fond hope, my son, that you will never need it." The son cursed his father's aged, softened mind, and threw the slipper back into the cauldron, resolving to use it henceforth as a rubbish pail. That very night, a peasant woman knocked on the front door. "My granddaughter is afflicted by a crop of warts, sir," she told him. "Your father used to mix a special poultice in that old cooking pot." "Begone!" cried the son. "What care I for your brat's warts?" And he slammed the door in the old woman's face. At once there came a loud clanging and banging from the kitchen. The wizard lit his wand and opened the door, and there, to his amazement, he saw his father's old cooking pot. It had sprouted a single foot of brass and was hopping on the spot in the middle of the floor, making a fearful noise upon the flagstones. The wizard approached it in wonder, but fell back hurriedly when he saw that the whole of the pot's surface was covered in warts. "Disgusting object!" he cried, and he tried firstly to vanish the pot, then to clean it by magic, and finally to force it out of the house. None of his spells worked, however, and he was unable to prevent the pot hopping him out of the kitchen, and then following him up the bed, clanging and banging loudly on every wooden stair. The wizard could not sleep at all night long, for the banging of the warty old pot by his bedside, and next morning the pot insisted upon hopping after him to the breakfast table. Clang, clang, clang went the brass-footed pot, and the wizard had not even started his porridge when there came another knock at the door. An old man stood on the doorstep. "'Tis my old Stokely, sir," he explained. "Lost she is, or stolen, and without her I cannot take my wares to market, and my family will go hungry tonight." "And I am hungry now," roared the wizard, and he slammed the door upon the old man. Clang, clang, clang went the cooking pot's single brass foot upon the floor. But now its clamour was mixed with the brays of a donkey and human groans of hunger echoing from the depths of the pot. "Be still! Be silent!" shrieked the wizard. But not all of his magical powers could quieten the warty pot, which hopped at his heels all day, braying and groaning and clanging, no matter where he went or what he did. That evening there came a third knock upon the door, and there, on the third stool, a young woman sobbing as though her heart would break. "My baby is grievously ill," she said. "Won't you please help us? Your father bade me come in trouble." But the wizard slammed the door on her, and now the tormenting pot filled to the brim with salt water, and slopped tears all over the floor as it hopped and brayed and groaned and sprouted more warts. Through no more villagers came to seek help at the wizard's cottage for the rest of the week. The pot kept him informed of their many ills. Within a few days, it was not only braying and groaning and slopping and hopping and sprouting warts, it was also choking and retching, crying like a baby, whining like a dog, and spewing out bad cheese and sour milk and a plague of hungry slugs. The wizard could not sleep or eat with the pot beside him, but the pot refused to leave, and he could not silence it or force it to be still. At last the wizard could bear it no more. "Bring me all your problems, all your troubles, and your woes," he screamed, fleeing into the night, with the pot hopping behind him along the road into the village. "Come, let me cure you, mend you and comfort you. I will mend my father's cooking pot, and I shall make you well." And with the foul pot still bouncing along behind him, he ran up the street, casting spells in every direction. Inside one house, the little girl's warts vanished as she slept. The lost donkey was summoned from a distant blare patch and set down softly in its stable. The sick baby was doused in dinner tea and woke well and rosy. At every house of sickness and sorrow, the wizard did his best, and gradually the cooking pot beside him stopped groaning and wrenching and became quiet, shiny and clean. "Well, Pot?" asked the trembling wizard as the sun began to rise. The pot burped out the single slipper he had thrown into it and permitted him to fit onto the brass foot. Together, they set off back to the wizard's house, the pot's footsteps muffled at last. But from that day forward, the wizard helped the villagers like his father before him, lest the pot cast off his slipper and began to hop once more. The end. Hope you enjoyed that, guys. Happy World Book Day.
Thanks very much, Sonny. Brilliant story. Nice costume, by the way. I love a bit of wizardry. Now, next up, we have Prof. Now, Prof is going to be reading us a story from Horrid Henry. Now, Horrid Henry is written by a lady called Francesca Simon and illustrated by Tony Ross. It's a really, really good book. So, enjoy.
Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be reading Horrid Henry and the Zombie Vampire. It's written by Francesca Simon, illustrated by Tony Ross, and it's published by Orion Children's Books. "Isn't it exciting?" said Perfect Peter, packing bunnykins carefully in his Sammy the Snail overnight bag. "A museum sleepover with torchlight, trail, and worksheets. I can't think of anything more fun." "I can," snarled Horrid Henry. "Being trapped in a cave with Clever Claire reciting all the multiplication tables from 1 to 1,000,000, watching Cooking Cuties, even visiting Nurse Needle for one of her horrible injections. Well, maybe not that. But almost anything would be better than being stuck overnight in our town museum on a class sleepover. No TV, no computers, no comics. Why, oh why did he have to do this? He wanted to sleep in his own comfy bed, not in a sleeping bag on the museum's cold, hard floor, surrounded by photos of old mares and a few dusty exhibits. Ah! Wasn't it bad enough he was bored all day in school without being bored at night too? Worse, Peter's nappy baby class was coming too. They'd probably have to be tucked up at 7 o'clock when they'd all start crying for their mamas. Oh! And then Miss Battleaxe snarling at them to finish their worksheets, and Moody Margaret snoring, and anxious Andrew whimpering that he'd seen a ghost. Well, no way was he going to do that boring old dump without some comics to pass the time. He'd just brought the latest Screaming Demon with a big article all about vampires and zombies. Yay! He couldn't wait to read it. Perfect Peter watched him stuff his Mutant Max bag full of comics. "Henry, you know you're not allowed to bring comics to the museum sleepover," said Perfect Peter. "Shut up and mind your own business, Toad," said Horrid Henry. "Mum, Henry just called me a toad," wailed Peter, "and he told me to shut up." "Toady, toady, 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 toady," jeered Henry. "Henry, stop being horrid, or no museum sleepover for you," yelled Mum. Horrid Henry paused. Was it too late to be horrid enough to get banned from the sleepover? Why hadn't he thought of this before? Why, he could... "Henry, Peter, we have to leave now," yelled Dad. Rats. The children queued up in the museum's central hall. clutching their sleeping bags as Miss Lovely and Miss Battleaxe ticked off names on a big register. "Go away, Susan," said moody Margaret. "After what you did at my house, I'm going to sit with Gurinder. So there." "You're such a meanie, Margaret," said sour Susan. "I'm not. R2. Susan scowled. Margaret was always mean. If only she could think of a way to pay that old grouch back. Margaret scowled. Susan was always annoying. If only she could think of a way to pay that old fraidy cat back. Henry scowled. Why did he have to be here? What he'd give for a magic carpet to whisk him straight home to the comfy black chair to watch Terminator Gladiator. Could life get any worse? "Henry," came a little voice next to him. "I love you, Henry. I want to give you a big kiss." Oh no, thought horrid Henry. Oh no. It was lisping Lily, New Nick's little sister. What was that foul fiend doing here? "You keep away from me," said horrid Henry, pushing and shoving his way through the children to escape her. "Whoa!" wept Weepy Willie as Henry stepped on his foot. "I want my mama," cried Needy Neil as Henry trampled on his sleeping bag. "But I want to marry you, Henry," lisped Lily, trying to follow him. "Henry, stay still," barked Miss Battleaxe, glaring at him with her demon eyes. "Hello, boys and girls. What an adventure we're going to have tonight," said the museum guide, Ernest Ella, as she handed out pencils and worksheets. Henry groaned. Boring! He hated worksheets. "Did you know that our museum has a famous collection of balls of wool through the ages?" droned Ernest Ella. "And an old railway car. Oh yes. It's going to be an exciting sleepover night. We're even going on a torchlit walk through the corridors." Horrid Henry yawned and sneaked a peek at his comic book, which he'd hidden beneath his museum worksheet. "Watch out, Demon fans! To celebrate the release of this season's big blockbuster horror film, The Zombie Vampires. Study this checklist. Make sure there are no zombie vampires lurking in your neighbourhood." Horrid Henry gasped as he read how to recognise a vampire and how to recognise a zombie. Big scary teeth, big googly eyes. Looks like The Walking Dead. Wow, that described Miss Battleaxe perfectly. All they had to add was big fat carrot nose and a dark shadow loomed over him. "I'll take that," snapped Miss Battleaxe, yanking the comic out of his hand. "And the rest." Huh? He'd been so careful. How had she spotted that comic under the worksheet? And how did she know about the secret stash in his bag? Horrid Henry looked around the hall. Aha. There was Peter, pretending not to look at him. How dare that wormy worm toad tell on him just for that? "Come along, everyone, line up and collect your torches for our spooky walk," said Ernest Ella. "You wouldn't want to get left behind in the dark, would you?" There was no time to lose. Horrid Henry slipped over to Peter's class and joined him in line with Tidy Ted and Goody Goody Gordon. "Hello, Peter," said Henry sweetly. Peter looked at him nervously. Did Henry suspect he'd told on him? Henry didn't look angry. Shame my comic got confiscated, said Henry, because it had a list of how to tell whether anyone you know is a zombie vampire. A zombie vampire? Said Tidy Ted. Yep, said Henry. They're imaginary, said Goody Goody Gordon. That's what they'd like you to believe, said Henry, but I've discovered some. Where? Said Ted. Horrid Henry looked around dramatically, then dropped his voice to a whisper. 2 teachers at our school, hissed Henry. 2 teachers, said Peter. What? Said Ted. You heard me. Zombie vampires. Miss Batlax and Miss Lovely. Miss Lovely, gasped Peter. You're just making that up, said Gordon. It was all in Screaming Demon, said Henry. That's why Miss Batlax snatched my comic. To stop me finding out the truth. Listen carefully. Henry recited. How to recognise a vampire. 1. Big, huge, scary teeth. If Miss Batlax's fangs were any bigger, she would trip over them, said Horrid Henry. Tidy Ted nodded. She does have big, pointy teeth. That doesn't prove anything, said Peter. Number 2. Drinks blood. Perfect. Peter shook his head. Drinks blood? Obviously they do. Not just in front of people, said Horrid Henry. That would give away their terrible secret. 3. Only appears at night. But Henry, said Goody Goody Gordon, we see Miss Batlax and Miss Lovely every day at school. They can't be vampires. Henry sighed. Have you been paying attention? I didn't say there were vampires. I said there were zombie vampires. Being half zombie lets them walk about in daylight. Perfect, Peter. And Goody Goody Gordon looked at one another. Here's the total proof, Henry continued. How to recognise a zombie. Number 1. Looks dead. Does Miss Batlax look dead? Definitely, said Horrid Henry. I never saw a more dead-looking person. But Henry, said Peter, she's alive. Unfortunately, yes, thought Horrid Henry. Duh, he said, zombies always seem to be alive. Plus zombies haven't got scary, bulging eyes like Miss Batlax, continued Henry, and they feed on human flesh. Miss Lovely doesn't eat human flesh, said Peter. She's a vegetarian. A likely story, said Henry. You're just trying to scare us, said Peter. Don't you see, said Henry. They're planning to pounce on us during the torchlit trail. I don't believe you, said Peter. Henry shrugged. Fine, don't believe me. Just don't say I didn't warn you when Miss Lovely lurches out of the dark and bites you. He shrieked. Be quiet, Henry, shouted Miss Batlax. William, stop weeping. There's nothing to be scared of. Linda, stand up. It's not bedtime yet. Bert, where's your torch? I don't know, said Beefy Bert. Miss Lovely walked over and smiled at Peter. Looking forward to the torchlit walk, she beamed. Peter couldn't stop himself sneaking a peek at her teeth. Were they big and sharp? Funny, he'd never noticed them before, how pointy 2 of them really were. And was her face a bit, pale? No, Henry was just trying to trick him. Well, he wasn't going to be fooled. Time to go exploring, said Ernestella. First stop on the Torchlit Trail, our brand new exhibit, Wonderful World of Wool. Then we'll be popping next door, down the passage to the past, to visit the old railway car and the Victorian shop and a Neanderthal cave. Torches on, everyone. Sour Susan smiled to herself. She'd just thought of the perfect revenge on Margaret for teasing her for being such a scaredy cat. Moody Margaret smiled to herself. She just thought of the perfect revenge on Susan for being so sour. Ha-ha, Margaret, thought Susan. I'll get you tonight. Ha-ha, Susan, thought Margaret. I'll get you tonight. Ha-ha, Peter, thought Henry. I'll get you tonight. Follow me, said Ernestella. The children stampeded after her, all except 3. When the coast was clear, Moody Margaret turned off her torch, darted into the pitch-black passage to the past hall, and hid in the Neanderthal cave behind the caveman. She'd leap out on Susan when she walked past. Wouldn't that old scaredy cat get a fright? Sour Susan turned off her torch and peeked down the passage to the past corridor. Empty. She tiptoed to the railway car and crept inside. Just wait till Margaret walked by. Henry turned off his torch, crept down the passage to the past, sneaked into the Victorian shop and hid behind the rocking chair. Tee, just wait till Peter walked past, hid. What was that? Was it his imagination? Or did the spinning wheel in the corner of the shop move? Creak went the wheel. It was so dark, but Henry didn't dare switch on his torch. Moody Margaret looked over from the Neanderthal cave at the Victorian shop. Was it her imagination, or was that rocking chair rocking back and forth? Sour Susan looked out from the railway car. Was it her imagination, or was the caveman moving? There was a strange scuttling noise. What was that, thought Susan. You know, thought Henry, this museum is kind of creepy at night. And then something grabbed onto his leg. Ah! Screamed horrid Henry. Moody Margaret heard a blood-curdling scream. Scarcely daring to breathe, Margaret peeped over the caveman's shoulder. Sour Susan heard a blood-curdling scream. Scarcely daring to breathe, Susan peeped out from the railway carriage. Henry, I found you, Henry! Piped the creature, clinging to his leg. Go away, Lily, hissed Henry. The horrible fiend was going to ruin everything. Will you marry me, Henry? No, said horrid Henry, trying to shake her off and brushing against the spinning wheel. Creak! The spinning wheel spun. What's that noise, thought Margaret, craning to see from behind the caveman. Henry, I want to give you a big kiss, lisped Lily. Horrid Henry shook his leg harder. The spinning wheel tottered and fell over. Crash! Margaret and Susan saw something lurch out of the Victorian shop and loom up in the darkness. A monstrous creature with 4 legs and waving arms. Ah! Screamed Susan. Ah! Screamed Margaret. Ah! Shrieked Henry. The unearthly screams rang through the museum. Peter, Ted and Gordon froze. You don't think, gasped Gordon. Not, trembled Peter. Zombie vampires, whispered Ted. They clutched one another. Everyone head back to the central hall now, shouted Ernest Allen. In the cafeteria, Miss Lovely and Miss Battleaxe were snatching a short break to enjoy a lovely fried egg sandwich with lashings of ketchup. Oh my weary bones, thought Miss Battleaxe as she sank her teeth into the huge sandwich. Peace at last. Ah, Eve, help! Miss Battleaxe and Miss Lovely squeezed their sandwiches in shock as they heard the terrible screams. Splat! A stream of ketchup squirted Miss Lovely in the eye and dripped down her face onto her blouse. Squirt! A blob of ketchup splattered Miss Battleaxe on the nose and dribbled down her chin onto her cardigan. Oh, sorry, Boudica, said Miss Lovely. Sorry, Lydia, said Miss Battleaxe. They raced into the central hall just as their classes ran back from the torchlit walk. 50 beams of light from 50 torches lit up the teachers' ketchup-covered faces and ketchup-stained clothes. Ah! Screamed Perfect Peter. It's the zombie vampires! Howled Tidy Ted. Run for your lives! Yelled Goody Goody Gordon. Wait! Shouted Miss Lovely. Children, come back! We won't eat you! Shouted Mrs. Battleaxe. Ah! And that's the end of that story. Bye-bye.